Hello everyone, this is MMBS-111, Introductory Microbiology, and this is the first mini lecture from Chapter 5, all about viruses. 5.1 is going to introduce how viruses were discovered and talk a little bit about the main characteristics of viruses. There are two main learning outcomes for this mini lecture. First, understand the debate regarding the characterization of viruses, and second, be able to identify the main properties of viruses. So viruses are able to infect every type of cell on Earth. There are viruses that infect bacteria, algae, fungi, protozoa, plants, and animals. They are the most predominant character, I guess, on Earth. Seawater is estimated to contain about 100 million viruses per milliliter. And for a long time, scientists didn't really understand what was the cause of viral infections. It was understood that it was something that could be passed from person to person. Louis Pasteur postulated that it was a living thing that was smaller than bacteria that was responsible for these diseases. And he was actually the first scientist to develop a vaccine for the rabies virus. And he also proposed the term virus that we continue to use today, that means poison in Latin. Viruses were first discovered by Ivanovsky and Biernik in tobacco, and they were able to isolate and identify the tobacco mosaic virus. And they did this through a filtering process where they filtered cellular fluid through a filter that was designed to trap bacterial cells, any cellular tissue that was contained in the fluid. And when they trapped this or collected this fluid and then injected it into another tobacco plant, it caused disease. So they determined that this cell-free fluid contained agents that could still cause disease. So there has been sort of this discussion or debate about the characterization of viruses, whether they're living or non-living, based on our understanding of cells and life on Earth and those main postulates of the cell theory. There are certain characteristics that we use to determine if an organism is living, and viruses do not meet all of those requirements. They are not able to replicate independently outside of a host cell. They also are not able to metabolize molecules for energy. So there's no metabolic processes that are occurring within viruses. However, viruses are capable of controlling and directing the functions of the cells that they infect. So there's this discussion about, whether we need to adjust our understanding of what qualifies as living. So the better terms to use really to describe a virus is to term it active if it is functioning and able to infect and control a cell's functions, or inactive, that it's no longer able to do those things, instead of stating living or non-living. Viruses have played a vital role in the evolution of life on Earth. Because they are able to infect cells, that infection influences the cell's genetic makeup. And we just looking at the human genome and mapping those genes, there is a large part of the human genome that is viral. They shape the way that cells, tissues, bacteria, plants, and animals have all evolved on Earth. Scientists have determined that approximately 10% of the human genome consists of sequences of DNA that come from viruses. 10 to 20% of bacterial DNA also contains viral sequences. So they've played a big part in how organisms have evolved over time. Viruses are what are considered obligate intracellular parasites. This means that they cannot multiply unless they invade a very specific host cell and instruct that cell's genetic information to make and produce and release new viruses. So these are the properties of viruses. This table is found in your textbook on page 117, it's top of the page. And these are the primary characteristics of viruses. So take a look at this table here and become familiar with it. We're going to talk more specifically about many of these properties as we move through chapter 5 and the mini lectures here. Finally, we need to talk about how viruses are classified and named. So viruses are not classified as other living organisms. For many years, once viruses were discovered, they were classified based on the host that they infected and the disease that they caused. Now that we have a little better understanding of viruses and we understand their structure and their chemical composition and what their genetic material is and those things, we classify them a little more specifically. So we still use hosts and the diseases that they cause, but we also classify viruses based on their structure, and we're going to talk more about the external and internal structure of viruses, also their chemical composition and similarities in genetic makeup. So we're going to talk about how some viruses have DNA as their genetic material while others have RNA, and how that sort of impacts their function and how they infect cells. So that's the end of 5.1. Make sure that you go through these questions, quiz yourself, and be sure that you can answer the questions here and that you have a good understanding of the learning objectives from this mini lecture. And I hope that this video was helpful.